The year is 2050, and somewhere in Colorado, a wild trout in a clear mountain stream darts about at the end of an angler's line. A determined hunter and his elusive target engage in an American tradition that embodies the true spirit of fair chase. A snowy trail leads hikers into a quiet mountain forest at a state park, and something wild and free provides an inspiring glimpse into the very essence of nature. Ironically, none of these events would be real if not for the foresight and the combined efforts of Coloradans many years ago. Back then, all of these activities required considerable funding to maintain and to preserve them for future generations. And remarkably, none of this funding came from tax dollars. So if not from taxes, where did the money come from? Hunters and anglers contributed the bulk of the funding. Money from the purchase of licenses helped support all wildlife, including non-game and threatened or endangered species. In addition, hunters and anglers also contributed when they purchased their equipment. Manufacturers of hunting and fishing equipment paid more than $1 billion each year in excise taxes. These funds were then distributed to state agencies for wildlife restoration and enhancement. Colorado's 42 state parks relied on funding that came from several sources, including the sales of parks passes, campground fees, and registration fees for boats, snowmobiles, and off-highway vehicles. Many Coloradans also made significant contributions to the funding of parks and wildlife through Great Outdoors Colorado. GOCO invested around $60 million each year from the Colorado Lottery toward the preservation and enhancement of the state's parks, trails, wildlife habitat, and open spaces in all 64 counties. Down through the years, these programs and campaigns encouraged and introduced new generations to the wonders and the importance of wildlife and the great outdoors. And now, it is our generation that must look ahead to ensure enjoyable and sustainable outdoor recreation for all of Colorado's residents and visitors. Learn more at cpw.state.co.us.
Hello, everybody. Let me just get rid of that screen. Welcome to the Hunter Outreach webinar series, episode number 4. Are we on 4, Brian?
We're on 4.
All right. I am going to start out this one, which is about big game hunting tactics. We're going to go through several different styles and methods for hunting big game. We're going to start out with introductions. If our panelists could reveal themselves, that will be great. Brian, let's start with you since you're in charge of the Hunter Outreach program. Brian, care to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Brian Postumus. I am the statewide Hunter Outreach Coordinator. I work out of the Denver office, but my job is to try and reach out to new hunters, new to Colorado. It's a wonderful job. I'm enjoying it. I just started it about a month ago, so I'm still learning in the process. So thanks for joining us, everyone.
All right, next we have Logan Wilkins.
Hi, I'm Logan Wilkins. I'm the District Wildlife Manager or Game Warden out in Lyman. I cover most of Lincoln County, out about an hour's drive east of Denver. And I've been on with the agency full-time for 6 years now.
Thank you, Logan. Justin, tell us all about yourself. You're on mute. Oh.
Unmute. Better?
If anybody has
yeah.
bingo,
So,
you can check off that box right now.
I'm Justin Bubenick. I am not employed by CPW, but I am a volunteer hunter education instructor and a former chairman of the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers California chapter. New to Colorado and excited to bring in a perspective from like the noob hunter and talk about some of the different tactics tonight. So excited to be here.
We're excited to have you, Justin. All right, new panelists this week. We have John Groves with that awesome background. John, please let us know a little bit about yourself and where you are physically, but also that beautiful background.
Hello, I'm John Groves. I'm the District Wildlife Manager, Game Warden out of Carbondale. So I cover parts of Eagle, Gunnison, Pitkin, Garfield counties. Great area. This is just a little hidey hole in my district that I love to get away to, and up the North Fork of the Crystal River. Fifth generation Colorado, and been hunting and fishing all my life, and what am I, 17 years on with the division at this point.
Thank you. And our additional folks helping us out with the Q&A today, we have Kathy Bronze. Kathy, can you tell us a little about yourself and your job?
Hi, yes, my name is Kathy Braun. So I'm the Southwest Region Education and Volunteer Coordinator. I'm based out of Durango, so I'll be in the Q&A box.
Excellent. And Andre Egley, relationship? Are we related? I can't tell. Andre, introduce yourself.
Yeah, ignore her. She's my wife. I'm Andre. I work for Colorado Parks and Wildlife in the Hunter Education Office. I'm also a Hunter Education Instructor. And like Kathy, I will be in the background answering the Q&A box.
Excellent. And I've just realized that after 3 of these, and this being our 4th one, I've never introduced myself. I'm Crystal Egley. I have been helping moderate these webinars. I'm actually a videographer for Colorado Parks and Wildlife in the marketing section that we have. Woohoo! We're awesome. I love our marketing section team. And I have actually taken up hunting and I documented it. So I'm really interested in novice hunters, people who are just starting hunting, people who could use a little bit more info. So I'm just super excited that Brian came up with this series and allowed me to be a part of it. So Brian, I'm going to have you kick us off with our first introduction to the first topic that we are discussing.
Great, thank you. As you can see, we've got a lot of people from across the state, various backgrounds. So if you have questions for us, we've got a Q&A button on the screen that you can ask us a question. We'll try and do our best to answer them. Just be patient. When we answer those, they should come available on the screen. So if you're following that on the side, just keep that in mind. You might learn something from other people's questions. If we get a lot of questions, especially on this topic, hunting tactics, a lot of the same questions, we're going to probably go to our panelists and just say, hey, here's some questions, some common questions. Let's spend a little bit of time and answer them. So even if we don't answer them directly to you in the Q&A box, we're going to try and get to you on the screen. We are recording this. This will be available on our YouTube channel, the Colorado Parks and Wildlife YouTube channel, probably in a couple of days. We have our other 3 webinars that we've done already. We started out with virtual scouting, the very first one, so that's posted right now. We went into the hunting statistics, that's posted right now. And last week we did the field scouting webinar, so that should be posted as well. So if you haven't tuned in, you can go and look at those. They're roughly an hour, 10, 20 minutes or so on it. So we're trying to provide some good, solid information for folks that are interested in hunting. We actually have quite a few people that have hunted for years and they're just open to learning something new. So thank you for joining us. Looks like we have just over 300 attendees. So we do expect we're going to get a lot of questions coming. So, you know, keep the questions coming, but we'll try and get to them as we go through this. All right, we're going to talk about hunting tactics today. And we're going to kind of share between a couple of different speakers and presenters. And the very first tactic we're going to talk about, Officer John Groves is going to talk to us about the concept of stand hunting or ambush hunting. So I'm going to turn it right on over to John.
Great, thanks, Brian. So getting into stand or ambush hunting, this is a tactic we can use where we go into an area, whether we use a tree stand or just use natural cover, but we just take a seat and let the game come to us, hopefully. This is not for people that are impatient. I am one that is like that. I sit for an hour or so and then I'm wanting to move again. But it is a very useful tactic. You get into an area where you're looking at feeding areas and that transition to bedding cover, trying to set up where you think those animals, those transition or those migratory movements are, from the feeding to the bedding areas. Find a place where you can set up, or close to a water hole, a wallow, set up next to a wallow, you know, during the elk season, during the rut, or during the archery season. You know, those are great places to set up and work on a stand, or out of a tree stand, or just on the ground, a ground blind. It can be a very successful tactic if you are patient enough. If you're like me, I don't do very well at that. I'll set for a few hours, maybe, you know, midday, watch a place, see if I can get something moving. Just doing a little day feeding coming out of their bedding area. Or if you know where the game is, you actually see them feeding in a meadow, you set up on their way to their bedding cover. You know, couple of things you need to really consider when you're doing that, you know, look for game trails, look for those benches or saddles where the animals are going to funnel through, moving from that feeding area to the bedding cover. Look for those wallows in your preseason scouting. Look for wallows. Look for rubs. If you get into an area where there's a bunch of rubs, you may, you know, want to sit in that area for a little while and just see what comes around. But the basic thing is look for those funnels between the habitat needs. Look between food, water, shelter, those basic needs. They're going to move every day from that cover to feed back again. So your best bet is to set up in those areas. You're going to want to set up in an area where, you know, you've got good cover and where you can play the wind. You know, if hunting in the morning, the wind is generally pushing down. In the evening, the wind is generally pushing up. So you know where you're setting may change a little bit from morning to evening. I think probably some of the best with stand or ambush tactics is do your scouting and figure out where those patterns are. If you're new to an area, you're going to have a hard time going in and finding the game you want unless you happen to see them. At least in my mind, in my experience, it's better if you do your preseason scouting, figure out those areas. But it can be done. If you drive into an area opening morning and you see game, but you can't get on them, you know, maybe move around and set up where those animals are going to move back to for when they go to bed midday or, you know, mid-morning. Overall, you know, this is one where it can be very successful. You just need to be patient.
Excellent. Anybody have anything to add on that subject, or should we do my favorite thing, which is polling the audience?
Hey John, I got a quick question for you. For stand hunting, if you were bow hunting versus, say, you know, firearm, rifle, muzzleloader, how might you set yourself up a little bit different on a stand hunting, like maybe distance from, you know, those funnels or corridors? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know, if you're bow hunting, you're going to want to be close to those corridors. If you're up in a tree, I mean, you're looking ideally 40 yards max from some of those. I mean, to be honest, I think a lot of guys shoot their bows too far. I prefer to see a lot closer shots. So, you know, ideally, you know, 40 yards max, out to 50 maybe, from those areas, but ideally 40 and in is your best best chance of success with a bow. You know, with a rifle, you can be quite a bit further, you know, out to 100, 200 yards even, you know, where you can see a lot more area sometimes with a firearm than you can with a bow.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so that's the first tactic, and when we talk about hunting tactics, we're going to talk a little bit about you don't just have to do one, you know, the entire day, right? You might change back and forth. So we'll get into a few more, but yeah, Crystal is going to do her poll, the first poll.
I'm so excited. Before we do a poll, I want to remind everybody, again, you can ask questions using the little Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. Also, if you click that, you can see us answering other people's questions. So perhaps somebody has already asked the question that you have on your mind. You can keep that box open and see what we're all chit-chatting about behind the scenes. All right, polling. First question, launch poll. Would you like CPW to send you email reminders for the last 2 webinars in this series? If you want a reminder because you keep forgetting, let us know. If you answer yes to this question, we can see who you are, and that will mean that we can then take your email address, and all we will do is send you reminders for this webinar series, nothing else. No other mailing lists. No, we're not going to sell your info. All right. I'm going to give you a couple more seconds to answer, and then we will move on to our next subject. Yes or no? There's still a lot of people still choosing between 2. All right, ready? All right, that's about it. Thank you, everybody. I will take that and you'll get an email reminder for the next 2. All right, the next section, Brian is actually going to talk about spot and stalk tactics. Brian, take it away.
All right, so spot and stalk starts out kind of like stand hunting, only you choose a different location. So the goal, real briefly, is you find a place where you can see a vast landscape. You see different parts of the habitat. Maybe you can't see into the dark timber or the heavy tree cover, but you should be able to see some of the openings in between some of those areas. So think about getting someplace where maybe you see that south-facing aspect that is probably a little bit more meadow or shrub areas. You might see game moving through there, but they're possibly moving between their habitat needs. So food, water, shelter. And what you're looking at in the spot and stalk is to try and find them moving in between those 3 areas. And once you find where they're at, ask yourself a couple of questions. What are they doing when you see them? Where are they going? Where did they come from? And as you start to answer those questions, you might not be able to answer all of them, but as you start to answer them, the more and more time you're out in the field, you're going to start to understand, okay, it's this time of day. Are they coming from their nighttime beds early in the morning? They're moving to cover. Are they feeding right now? Well, where might they go? Maybe they're going to be thirsty and they're going to go find some water, and then maybe they're heading someplace to bed down. I've had a lot of great opportunities where I've done some spot and stalk strategies where I'm just on a high knob, a high point where I can see miles and miles of landscape. I got my binoculars, I got a spotting scope, I see game, and I just watch them, right? I watch until maybe they bed down. I've seen deer while I'm bow hunting. I've seen deer bed down in some of those high elevation shrublands, you know, that subalpine shrublands. I can see right where they bedded down, right in the middle of that cover. Now I can plan my stalking strategy. So the concept of the spot and stalk, you have to see them first. It might be, you know, 3-4 hours in the morning, just sitting on your keister, got your optics, and just being vigilant to cover the landscape up and down. Look for those key areas of open meadows or gaps between trees, and look for game moving across. If you can figure out where they're going, if you see them bed down, awesome. Now you probably have a couple of hours to try and set up an approach or a stalk. If you're bow hunting, you're probably going to have to get really close to them. So you really, really, really have to play the wind. So have some type of a wind detection device. It might be, you know, a little powder sniffer thing, little in a bottle. When I'm on a stalk, I use that probably every 5 minutes. So I'm looking at the wind changing on me. Sometimes you can, throw some dry grass up in the air, see where it's going. So there's all different wind detection devices out there. So find one that works for you. But play that wind. You want the wind in your face or crossing. So the worst thing is having your scent being brought to where these animals are on the bed. If they wind you, there's a good chance that they're gone, and they may leave that hunting area that you're in for a few days. They might just completely take off. So if the wind changes, be ready to back out and maybe approach in a different direction. So I've been busted plenty of times, and those deer took off on me. There's other times I backed off, they didn't leave. I was able to approach from a different direction. Use cover as much as you can. Use topography as much as you can. So when you're spot and stalking, you see an animal, start looking for those landmarks, those features on the landscape that as you move this way or move that way, you have those landmarks that you can see from a different position. So maybe it's a really radical looking tree or a big rock of some sort, but focus on those landmarks to help you navigate as you start looking in that area from all different perspectives. Couple of things to be thinking about when you're doing this. For bow hunting, you're probably gonna have to get really, really, really close. It might be something where you get pretty close and then you just stop and you wait maybe for that animal to get up and move, and maybe they get into a position where you get a shot. Maybe they go the other direction. That's happened to me before too. If you're rifle hunting, muzzleloader hunting, where you can reach out much longer range, you don't necessarily have to get that close to them. So the concept is use your binoculars to view miles of landscape. Once you find the game, see if you can make an approach. If the wind is bad or you just don't have cover, just be patient. Maybe find some other herds that are out there, some game in another place where you have better odds of going after them. So any panelists have any other thoughts to add on the spot and stalk strategy? All right.
I'm going to put in the chat box for everybody, panelists and attendees, a link for where you can find previous recordings for these Zoom sessions. We've got a lot of questions about that. We actually have the first 3 up, and this one should be up by mid next week-ish. So I'm going to put that in the YouTube, in the comments thing right now. And here you go, everybody. All right. Next up, we have Logan, who is going to talk about still hunting tactics, and then another poll when he's done. I love the polls. All right, Logan, still hunting tactics. Take it away.
All right. So still hunting is kind of similar to what it sounds. You're going to be moving through usually densely covered area really, really slow. The idea is to cover ground. Most of the time when this is happening, you're in an area that you're unsure if there's game there, and more than likely they're going to be bedded there already. So if I'm in the mountains hunting elk during archery season, I still hunt through dark timber, places that I think might be a bedding area. I prefer to try and stay out of those, at least for the first earlier portions of my hunt, so that I don't blow game out. But sometimes when you just get stuck crossing an area that you don't know if there's anything in there, or if you're purposely going through a bedding area, you just want to move really, really slow, because most of those animals are going to be bedded. They're going to be sitting still, and they're just hanging out and watching for danger, and they're going to pick that up through smell and sight and hearing mainly. So you want to keep the wind in your favor, and you want to move really, really slow, stopping to glass with binoculars, and you're looking for just little parts of an animal through the trees or the brush, whether you're looking for the tips of an ear, an antler, a tine, the swish of a tail, because those animals aren't going to be moving much, and so you want to move enough that they don't see you and you see them first, in order to make a play on them. That's a way to start your spot and stalk tactic. If you see them first, then you can adjust your route or adjust your plan accordingly to get to a position of advantage to either get ahead of where you think they're going to get up out of their bed or put a stock on where they're at. So the keys to still hunting really, you want to be as quiet as possible, and you want to be slow and steady. And if you have binoculars, take the time to use them. I usually stop and glass within every couple of steps, and I'll spend several minutes to cover just a few yards. And I spend a lot more time glassing all the way around me than I do actually moving through those areas. Take the time to move branches, move tree limbs, dead leaves, things like that. Take the time to watch where you're stepping so you're not making any noise. And it works quite well. I've actually walked into a few feet of bears bedded down underneath trees, and none of us were quiet and still when either of us figured out the other was there. But quite exciting, and it's a good way to walk up on game that you don't know is there. But when you see them, a lot of times you can get pretty close to them. That's about all I got there, unless somebody else has something to add.
Oh, no, I was just Googling hunting jokes to fill that poll time, but I haven't found one yet. I was on a different window. So if anybody can think of a hunting joke while I launch the next poll, get it ready. All right, next poll question. Here we go, poll number 2. We have, what is your gender? Female, male, non-binary, something else, prefer not to say. Anybody have a hunting joke? No? Okay. Brian does. Brian does.
All right. What did the pheasant say to the novice pheasant hunter?
What
Quack,
did he?
quack.
What? Oh! Quack, quack. Because it's not a pheasant. That's amazing. All right. Thank you very much, Brian. All right. We are ending the poll. And next up is Justin. Justin is going to be discussing drive tactic. This is a pretty interesting one, folks, so pay attention. Justin, take it away.
Sure, and hope they'll keep this short because honestly, drive tactics aren't something that's practiced like overtly in Colorado. But something that I did in the East Coast when I went out to Pennsylvania and visited friends, we did practice something that was called driving, where it was, we'd have a small plot of land, more or less, and there would be a group of individuals that would line up. And I think the closest thing that I could think of, like, comparatively would be pheasant hunting, where there was people lined up pushing a field or a plot of timber through while other individuals were at the opposite end waiting for the game to come up the opposite end. And it was very successful and it worked well when we were in Pennsylvania. A few friends were able to get some shots off. But I think that one of the things that when we consider that practice is the firing line and where we're actually shooting as the game comes out, and making sure that we're practical and safe and know our target when we actually get out there. And I think that in an area such as Colorado and bigger country, it can be a difficult thing to determine how far your bullet will be able to travel. There's a lot of flatter land out east in Colorado where your bullet could travel upwards of a mile, and pushing or driving can be something that's just not a feasible or safe option. But it can be effective in smaller game areas that you're able to locate, and there's a lot of BLM areas up in the mountainous areas where you can actually kind of pin them up against private land. It can be more appropriate, but I think that I just can't probably say enough how important safety is, and making sure that you know your target, you know your distance, you know where your bullet's going to travel. And it can be an effective practice, but something that should be done with limitations and with knowing your target. So.
Yeah, thanks, Justin, for highlighting the safety part of that. That's the drive tactic can be super scary, especially for a new hunter. So yeah, if people try that, you know, it might be more private land, smaller pieces of private land. But yeah, just know that you can trust all of the hunters in your hunting party. You know where your safe shooting zones are. I would really discourage it if you're hunting some of the state wildlife areas out east. Typically, a lot of people do like a stand hunt out east. They'll kind of hang out up on a hill above a drainage and wait for game to naturally move out in the morning. I know I've been the victim. I guess I call it a victim, but as I'm sitting up on my stand early in the morning, hunters come through and they drive all the game out of that area. And there was 4 or 5 hunters that were spread out across that area that just never even had a chance to shoot because all the game was just flying out of there. So things to think about, you know, share the woods with other hunters, share the woods with other people that are out there, practice safety, practice good ethics. So thanks for sharing that, Justin. All right.
Next, we have our district wildlife managers. They're going to talk about some additional points, including regulations, ethics, and safety. And hopefully they'll get some of the questions that we've been getting frequently in the Q&A covered. And take it away, Logan and John. This is all yours. Anytime. Do you need help unmuting? Hold on.
There we go. I think
there you go. Okay.
So just a few things to cover for you know, new hunters out there. You know, one thing we look at as group or party hunting, what we call party hunting is where maybe one person has a license, but everybody hunts until all licenses are filled. You know, but technically what we're supposed to do is each hunter fills their own license. You can't fill another hunter's license for them. So we want to make sure that that each hunter out there, you know, once they've harvested their animal, they can go out and walk around in the woods, but they probably shouldn't be carrying a gun or a bow or whatever else. You know, so that's one for some states allow it, but Colorado does not. You know, as far as radios and text, there is technically no regulations against it unless you commit other violations while using a radio, communicating back and forth. But on the ethics side, we're getting into that fair chase ethics component of it, and you know, your buddy sitting on a hill telling you where the elk are, or, you know, guiding you in. Really, it's just poor ethics, in my opinion. It gets away from that fair chase and what the meaning of the hunt is supposed to be. You know, you and the animal. You know, and I'll let Logan weigh in on that as well, see if he has any other thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, animals can't text each other back and forth and say, hey, there's a guy coming down the ridge your way on your side of the mountain where you usually sleep. So back in the day, a lot of people, without using technology, could still guide their partners in, you know, using hand signals and holding up different colored towels or whatever and doing things like that. And, you know, said person coming down the hill is looking across the draw with binoculars to see if he needs to go left or right or something like that. So you can still accomplish the same sort of task without utilizing technology in the same way, just to kind of build on that primitive aspect there, and keep that fair chase a little more in conjunction with how things have been in the past. I know it's very tempting to use text and radios and things like that, but yeah. I'm kind of with John on that one. It starts to get away from that. They're definitely a valuable tool for survival and emergency situations. So have them available. Just limit how you're using them, because if there are other violations going on, that's an additional charge that can be added in those situations as well. The next one to talk about is hunting near vehicles and roads. Obviously, it's a big safety violation to have a loaded firearm in a vehicle, but again, going to fair chase, we don't want to hunt with our vehicles. You can't use your vehicles to drive or spook game towards somebody else. Get out and walk. Don't utilize that vehicle quite so much. You're hunting, so go ahead and use the quads that God gave you a little bit more. And then with roads, if it's a public maintained road, you have to be, if you're shooting a single projectile weapon, whether that's archery or a rifle or a muzzleloader, you have to be 50 feet off the center line of a road before you can shoot at game. And then if it's just a public road, and so think of some of the Forest Service 2 tracks that aren't maintained regularly, but there's still a public road and public access, you can't shoot across them. Even if it's down in the bottom of the hole and you're shooting across the top of the draw, it's a violation to shoot across the road, period. So definitely watch out for that. And then the last one we have kind of on this list of things to talk about or touch on for regulations is private property. I know this is a huge deal up in the mountains where John's at. There's lots of public land, and I'll let him speak more to BLM and National Forest and stuff like that in a minute. Out east, most of our ground out here is going to be private land, other than the state wildlife areas that we own or state parcels that we lease. A big mix-up that happens out here is land does not have to be posted as private. You are expected to know where you're at. And if there's not a fence or signs, that does not mean you can walk on it. You have to know the landowner, whether they have it signed or posted or not, and you have to have permission to be there. The same holds true with state trust lands that are managed by the state land board. There's a lot of those parcels that our agency leases, and we're leasing more in the next last year and this year and then next year again. We're increasing by about 500,000 acres. By the time it's all said and done, we'll be leasing close to 1 million acres of state trust lands for public access. Those are, you can find out which ones those are using our atlas or some of those like Onyx maps and some of those different resources there. But we also put out a public lands brochure. You can download it off of our website or pick it up where we sell licenses. All those parcels will be listed in there, but just because you pull up Onyx maps and see something that says Colorado State Trust Lands and it's blue, does not mean it's public access, and you can get a citation for trespassing on those parcels if somebody else is leasing the hunting right or the recreation right on it. And a trespassing ticket is 20 points against your hunting and fishing privileges, which automatically makes you eligible for suspension of those privileges. So that's one to really keep an eye on and know exactly where you're at. You can't trespass on a property even to retrieve an animal that you've wounded. You have to have permission ahead of time. If that's something that you're struggling to get, or you run into a sticky situation, back out, call our office, call State Patrol, get a hold of the local wildlife officer, and we'll help you to manage that situation without you doing something that's going to get you into trouble or cause you to have a citation. We'll help you work through that. And a lot of times we can gain access to go with you or to even go in there ourselves and retrieve your animal for you and bring it back to you. So I'll let John touch on National Forest and BLM stuff up in his area.
Yeah, the private property issue is a pretty big deal. There is lots and lots of public land that people can hunt. But often the game is coming off of private. So if you're hunting along those boundaries between public and private, I would make sure you're far enough away from that private land that once you take a shot, that deer, elk, whatever, doesn't get back onto the private side. Like Logan said, if you don't have permission to retrieve your elk or deer, you cannot go on that property. And there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to retrieve that deer or elk. We'll do everything we can to try to help you, but it's a ethics thing. You're taking a chance on potentially wounding or losing that animal because you don't have have access to that private property. So just make sure you're staying off of those fence lines, you know, not hunting right on them. Give those animals a chance to move away from that private, and then make a good, clean, ethical shot so that they don't have a chance to get back to the private side.
Something I'll add to that, John. Typically, animals, if they're coming across the property line or boundary, when you shoot and they're spooked from that shot, they're going to retreat back the way they came most of the time, because they know that that's a safe route, and everything in front of them that they just arrived at prior to that shot, in their mind is danger. So if something just hops the fence and you take a shot at it, it's very likely going to turn around and dash back the way it came, back over that fence, because it knows that was safer than where it just arrived. A couple more things to touch on with this. We don't recommend, you know, I guess I'll say it this way: take ethical shots. We don't recommend taking shots at running or moving game. Know your limitations on your range, whether you're hunting with any weapon, whether it's a rifle or archery or muzzleloader. Practice, know your limitations, and hunt within those. Preferably look for shots that are broadside, not less quartering to, quartering away are good shots, but make ethical shots that's going to put an animal down relatively quickly, and not risk wounding loss. Be safe with your shots. Know what's behind your target. Know what your bullet is going to hit, whether you miss or you pass through. The same goes for archery. You are responsible for that projectile no matter where it ends up. So be conscious of that. Don't take shots. If you can see skyline behind an animal, just don't take that shot. If you don't harvest that specific animal that day, that situation, then you get to hunt another day. You're not done. And that's, you know, missing an opportunity due to safety or ethical concerns, in my mind, is not a missed opportunity at all for that harvest, because you get to go out and hunt again, and you get to enjoy the outdoors for another day. And the last one I'll touch on, and see if there's anything John wants to jump in with, but consider, I guess I'd say, consider not loading, especially firearms, but also archery equipment, while you're out walking around. Once you get set up, if you're doing an ambush or a stand or a blind, load up once you get there. But otherwise, while you're out traipsing around and walking around and hiking, leave your chamber unloaded. You know, have rounds in your magazine so that you can load something relatively quickly once you've spotted game, or something that you're going to take a shot at. But I can't speak for Don. I've had the unpleasant responsibility of responding to a hunting accident that turned out to be fatal, and it's not a fun thing for us to respond to. It's not something that anybody wants to go through, and not something to put on your family. So it's a huge safety issue, to just know that. We talk about it in Hunter Ed. The safety on the gun is a mechanical object that can fail. And if that fails, your gun can't go off if there's nothing in the chamber. So highly encourage people to just save loading their chamber until, or their bow until they're ready to shoot, and that opportunity is there to limit those types of accidents that could happen. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I fully agree with Logan on that. Even around vehicles, I recommend they be completely unloaded when they're in a vehicle. There's no need for it to be anything in the chamber, obviously in the chamber, which is against the law, but anything in the magazine. It is illegal to have a loaded magazine on an ATV or a UTV. So just have one standard, keep it unloaded in a motor vehicle of any kind. And when you're walking around in the woods, go ahead and have it in the magazine, but keep that chamber unloaded. It's too easy to be walking through brush, something catch it, you know, that firearm could go off. There's no need to have it. It takes a split second to put a shell in the chamber and be able to fire on something.
Hey, would you guys maybe help address a couple of questions that we had in the Q&A session? There's a question about any legal requirements as far as ground blinds. I think we could kind of address maybe tree stands And then there was, I'm trying to think what some of the other questions were, Q&A, but I'll see if I can find that in the meantime. But would you maybe help some of the folks that are online asking questions about ground blinds and maybe tree stands?
Sure. Can you, I guess, what specifically is the question in regards to tree stands and ground blinds? I haven't been able to keep up on the questions there, Brian.
Yeah, I think it's more, are you allowed to put them out the night before? I think there's, if you happen to come across a ground blind or a tree stand and no one's in it, are you allowed to use it? Do you have to put your names on it? How soon after the end of a season do you have to pull it out? A state land, that kind of stuff?
Sure. It's going to depend on whether you're on public or private. And on private land, you can, do whatever you or as the landowner or the landowner that you're hunting on will allow you to do. I know a lot of people, I don't recommend leaving tree stands in trees year round because the straps will wear out and weather and can fail on you, and that could be a huge safety concern. But you can, leaving them up all season long and stuff is pretty common practice, I would say, out here. I'm trying to find it in the brochure here real quick, but on public land, we do have limits on when you can put your stands up and how long they can be off. If you give me just a second, John, there's something you want to add? I was going to find that and just read it out of here.
No, I off the top of my head, I cannot remember that one. I honestly don't recall. But the Forest Service regulations, I believe it's 30 days and then it becomes abandoned property. So
yeah. So I'm just going to read this out of the brochure. It's on the big game brochure. If anybody has one, I'm on page 15, number 6 of illegal activities. So it is illegal to establish a permanent structure or plant vegetation on CPW-owned land or waters. Only portable blinds and tree stands for big game hunting can be erected on CPW land and no more than 30 days prior to the season during which they will be used. No nails can be driven into trees. Man-made materials for blinds or stands must be removed within 10 days after the season. They are used in ends, and the owner's CID number and the dates of use must be visible on the outside of the portable blind or underside of the tree. Placement of blinds or stands does not reserve them for personal use. They may be used on a first-come, first-served basis. So I think that's going to answer a bunch of those questions, probably, Brian. So you can put it up no more than 30 days prior to the season you plan to hunt, and it has to be taken down within 10 days after the season that you are hunting closes. You need to have your CID number visible on the stand or the blind, as well as the dates that you plan to use it. Having that set on public land does not give you exclusive rights to it. Somebody else can find your tree stand and sit in it. Good ethics and I guess respect for your fellow man would be to leave somebody else's stand or their location alone, especially on the dates that they have signed up to use them. You know what I mean? So just be courteous to everybody else, but that's also there because we have had situations on in some of our state wildlife areas where there's 3 or 4 tree stands in the same tree around the same water hole, which kind of gets a little ridiculous too. So, but as far as it's concerned, you can have it up 30 days prior, have your CID number on it, and you have to take it down within 10 days afterwards.
Great, thank you. One other regulations, there's several people that had some questions about if they're bow hunting, carrying a pistol with them. There's some questions in regards to maybe bow hunting, but they've got a rifle bear tag, that kind of stuff. Do you guys have any advice, regulations, so that people going out, they got some confidence that they're following the rules, the regulations when it comes to probably bow hunting and some type of a firearm season or just a backup pistol for protection?
I'll touch on that. As far as that, it is a open carry state, so they can carry a handgun on them at any time. I typically recommend against carrying a rifle and a bow during the same season. We're going to have some stronger questions for them and make sure that whatever their license says, that's the way they're harvesting their animal. even that, if they have a rifle bear tag and are hunting with the bow in the fall, they can still use that bow for a rifle bear. You can always use a lower method of take versus a higher method of take. If you have an archery license, you're restricted to archery, but if you have a rifle, you can use muzzleloader archery as well. So I would say harvest your elk with the bow and then go back for the bear with the rifle later.
The other thing I'd add to that is just also, if your seasons and your tags overlap and you are doing that, if you are harvesting or hunting under the provisions of your rifle license during that season, you are required to wear your orange as well. So keep that in mind, that even if you have a rifle tag and that's what you're harvesting with, you need to have the required orange for that tag, even if you're using a bow.
Oops, sorry, Brian, you go ahead.
Yeah, I know there's a couple of questions that have been out there dealing with outfitters. If you guys got any quick advice on how do you get tied in with maybe some outfitters, if you're hunting in such and such a unit, do you have any advice on where to find outfitters? Yeah, I think that's a good question out there. And I'm just going to kind of preface it before maybe one of you guys can answer that. If you're brand new to hunting in Colorado, and some of these tactics just don't make sense, maybe you're like, I'm not confident to go out yet. Think about looking into a guide or outfitter for that very first hunt. It might be just enough information that you see they're going to be using some of these tactics out in the field. So it might be a good opportunity to learn, and then after that you can kind of use some of those tactics on your own, for your own hunts.
Yeah, as far as finding an outfitter, probably the best thing to do is figure out the unit, the area you're going to be going to, then either look at the Colorado or the Outfitters Association, Colorado Outfitters Association, look with them, contact the local Forest Service or BLM and see who is actually permitted for those areas, because they only allow a certain number of permits. You may get a guy outfitting, but he may not be permitted to actually work in those areas that you want to go to. So get the information from the Forest Service, and then they should be able to give you a list of the permitted outfitters for the area, and then contact them directly, or even the local district wildlife managers are a good resource as far as that goes, to let folks know, as far as outfitters, who's legal, who's not in an area.
Yeah, I just say with that, just do your homework. When you contact that outfitter, ask for references, find some other people that have hunted with them, and do some homework and some background, make sure everything on their end is legit, and everything that, their previous clients are happy with the results that they had with that person. It's just like purchasing any other, service that you would. Do some homework behind it before you jump into that.
Great, thank you guys. Crystal, did we do our poll number 3?
Wait, I had an ethics story I wanted to tell really quick. So ethics, as everybody might know if they've taken Hunter Ed, is not necessarily what the law is, but where the line of what you personally think right or wrong is, even when nobody's looking. If you're all by yourself, would you still rob the bank? Kind of thing, right? So one day last year, I was out on a hunt, and I was actually with a district wildlife manager who's a friend of mine, and we were both off work hours, and we were doing kind of separate hunts but near each other. And when we went back to the bunkhouse for lunch, I asked if she had harvested an animal, and she said yes. And I asked her to tell me the hunt story, right? So she told me that this deer, this big buck, was sitting 30 yards away from her, laying down eating grass, and she was sitting there with her rifle trained on it for 2 hours. And I was like, well, why didn't you just shoot it for the 2 hours, right? If she could have just shot it. And so she actually was like, well, it's not fair to me personally to shoot an animal that's like peacefully resting, like laying on the ground, and she didn't want to shoot it until it stood up. So she waited until it stood up and actually started walking and then took the shot. So, well, started walking, then stopped a little bit, then took the shot, I should clarify. But yeah, she did not want to shoot an animal like that because she didn't think it was fair. So I just wanted to share that story that if you don't ever want to take a shot for any reason at all, you do not have to. You don't have to if somebody else says to do it. You don't have to do it because you know, your friends took the shots at a running animal. You do not have to do it, right? And that is your personal choice. And if people don't respect your personal ethics, then maybe they're not the best people to go hunting with. So I just wanted to share that with everybody. All right, next poll. Poll question. This is the final poll question. I love poll questions. All right, we are interested in what your race or ethnicity is. We have African American, Asian, Caucasian, Latinx, Native American. It's not on this very short list, and prefer not to say. Feel free to click that one if you have any hesitation at all. And while people are answering the poll questions, I'm going to tell a joke. So as you all know, the Q&A, you can click and see what answers we are giving to folks. Somebody actually suggested this joke and I did reply. So you can, I'm sure a lot of you have seen this, but it made me laugh. So I have to read it out loud. All right. A hunter was lost. And so in Hunter Ed, they teach you to, if you're lost, you shoot in the air 3 times. So shot in the air 3 times as he learned in his Hunter Ed class. He was scared and just as he was discovered by his party. So his party came along and he was super relieved because he was on his last arrow. That's funny because arrows don't make sounds. Okay. All right. So we are going to end this poll. Thank you, everybody. So excited. All right. So next subject, Brian, using all 3 tactics. So we're going to have Brian talk about that, using all 3 tactics. And then after that, we are going to finish with a discussion where the panelists get to take turns describing their favorite hunting tactics. All right, Brian.
All right. So let's try and play this out a little bit. Elk, deer, pronghorn, you know, big game animals. Quite often they're bedding at night into some type of cover. Maybe just before the sun comes up or as the sun comes up, they're going to leave those beds and they're probably going to go feed. Maybe they get water, but maybe they're going to go get food. So, you know, elk are probably going to go after grasses most of the hunting seasons. You know, the deer are probably going to go after flowering plants, the stems of shrubs, shoots of aspen that are coming up. That's kind of their primary food. They'll feed on grass a little bit too. But think about where they might be feeding and think about the strategies that you might employ. One of these 3 different tactics. So if they feed early in the morning, maybe in the first 3 hours after the sun comes up, sometime in that window, there's a good chance some of those animals are coming out into a place where you can see maybe from a distance. So a spot and stalk strategy isn't a bad way to get started early in the morning. If you see game, then you can kind of make a plan on going after it. If you don't see game, now think about, okay, what are they doing after they feed? Maybe they're going to water. So if you know, or maybe you've seen them feeding, but you're not close enough to get a shot or to sneak up on them. Think about maybe where's a water source nearby, and maybe you can sneak in there with cover and play the wind, of course, to your favorite. Sneak in there and maybe you can transition that into a stand or an ambush hunt. So you're there hoping that maybe they come and they drink some water there. The other option you have at that point too is to think about after they feed, after they've gotten water, they have to bed down someplace and they're probably going to go to cover somewhere, right? The dark timber, the aspen, thick shrub areas. They're going to bed down to avoid predators, but they're going to bed down and they're going to rest for a couple hours. When they feed, they fill their first stomach. And then when they bed down, they're actually ruminating that. They're bringing it up. Some of the acids are starting to break down the plant material and the cell walls. So they're going to sit there and they have to sit there for a couple of hours. that could be your stock opportunity if you know where they've bedded. If you don't know where they've bedded, think about where some good cover is, especially if you maybe know where, if you scouted and you've seen areas of good game trails in the area, the benches, maybe you've seen directions of animals moving when they've been out in the open. Think about where the paths that they've been using, where might that lead to? And then employ that still hunt strategy through the dark timber, looking for them. So I oftentimes will use that still hunt from mid-morning until, maybe 11:30. I've found a lot of big game animals are moving again midday, right? Their first stomach has processed a lot of the food, pushed it down into the second, third, fourth stomachs. So it's digesting, but maybe they're a little bit hungry. Maybe they need some more water and they might move. But middle part of the day, I don't expect big game animals to be going into that meadows that maybe they're at in the morning, or maybe that they go to in the evenings. I expect them to be in smaller meadows in the area. So if I've scouted that, I might try and set myself into an area where I can predict a little bit where they're moving from their day beds, maybe to go find a little food source in one area. So then I'm going to go on a stand hunt again in the middle of the day for a couple of hours. I might look at a place where, maybe a couple of drainages come together and funnel into one drainage. That could be a good corridor where animals are moving down two of them and they just go meet up with another drainage. Saddles where they may be crossing, nice flat benches, a steep hillside, but when it flattens out a little bit, that's called a bench. That's a great place for game to be moving. So midday, oftentimes I'll go on my stand or ambush hunt. I'll just try and find a place where I think animals are likely to be moving, to go from food or water or to cover. If I don't get anything, then I go back into my still hunt strategy and I still hunt some cover, see if I can find some bedded animals mid-afternoon. And then as we're getting to the late hours of the day, I might do either a stand or ambush hunt in an area, maybe where they funnel through to go feed someplace. I might do a stand or ambush hunt there. Or I might prep for tomorrow's hunt. And that's simply just getting up onto a spotting knob and seeing if I can see animals as the sun is going down. At least I know they're in the general area, and I can then get up into there the next morning, get up early, move in the cover of darkness, and try and head them off. Because I figure they're probably going to be generally in that area, and maybe they'll come back and feed the next morning. So that's some thoughts of trying to put everything together. So you don't just have to do one hunt all day long. If that's the hunt you want to do, you can do that hunt. Like John says, I don't have the patience to sit there for all day long. I need to move, right? I need to move. But when I get tired, I'm trying to find a spot where I can do a stand ambush. I'll sit there for a couple of hours. When I get antsy, now I do a still hunt. So I hope that kind of helps. Panelists, what would you guys add to the hunting strategies, whether putting it all together or any good stories that you've had?
I'm gonna go first. All right, so after the first time I hunted big game was about 6 months after I gave birth to my daughter. So I had these visions in my head of starting to hunt in the mountains and doing one of the like walk and stalk methods. I was gonna be like real rugged. I was like, that's the best fair chase option for me. If I make a noise and scare it away, that's on me. I need to learn the land and all that stuff. But I actually wasn't physically capable of doing that after having my daughter. So I ended up on the Eastern Plains in a ground blind. And it turns out when you're in a ground blind, you can bring a space heater with you. So we would pack out a space heater. And I have to say, I thought this was not the kind of hunt I wanted to go on. It was like the glamping version of hunting. But for where I was physically at the time, that's kind of what I had to do if I wanted to get food for my fridge. So I kind of came down off my high horse, and I used that as an example for anybody of any ability can hunt, any fitness level. It just depends on what feels right to you and what you're physically capable of, what you're emotionally capable of. But there's no shame. There is no shame in sitting in a ground blind with a space heater, okay? I'm very proud of that because I did harvest a deer ethically and humanely, and I did get the meat and ate it with my family. However, in the future, I think I want to try stalking the animal this upcoming deer season. So that's just me, something for everybody out there. John, what's your favorite?
I don't know. I think I'm more the spot and stock, but I usually roll with a combination of all of them to some extent. I spend a lot of time moving, glassing, trying to cover country, trying to look at as much terrain as I possibly can. But once I find animals, then it's time to slow down. Often, I'll sit and watch an animal, or watch a group of animals, even if it's a day or two. If I know they're there, I'll kind of pattern them and then figure out where to go to catch them in those movements. I had a goat hunt last year. It took me 3 days, but I was covering country. I found a goat the first day and ended up, it took me 3 days before everything actually worked out, where he moved into the right area, where I could get a shot, where everything just worked out right. But in the meantime, when he wasn't there, I was covering ridge lines and trying to find other animals, and kept coming back to the specific one. So overall, I think it's a matter of what the individual is comfortable with and what they're physically able to do, what their patience level is, and often what the game is doing. What the animals are doing as to what your best tactic is going to ultimately be.
Excellent. Logan, how about you? What do you like to do when you hunt? Oh, can't hear you, Logan.
Better?
I'm sure you just said something really, really smart and engaging and funny.
It was perfect.
Yeah.
No, I grew up on the Eastern Plains, archery hunting, spot and stock for mule deer, and I absolutely love it. I still love doing that, but as I've, done different things throughout my life and traveled around the state to hunt, I utilize a little bit of everything. For instance, when I'm elk hunting, I spend a lot of time walking. I cover a lot of ground. If I'm going through thick cover, I still hunt through it. If I can get someplace in the morning and glass and spot and stock, and I'll utilize that. Even if that means I see elk go into a stand of timber and not come out, I know they're bedded in there somewhere, so I'll make my way to that spot and then still hunt into it or through it. I like to spend the middle of the day, if I can find a water source to sit on, relax my legs, and just kind of sit that water source while I have my lunch and stuff like that. So I utilize a little bit of everything. I really enjoy out here on the plains for deer, on the creek beds and the river bottoms, finding scrape lines, finding rubs and things like that, and looking for that perfect ambush spot. Unlike these guys, I tend to have trouble sitting still all day long, but I tend to have a lot more success when I just be patient and do that versus moving around and giving my position away. So I do a little bit of everything, but I guess my heart's with spot and stalking. So.
Andre, would you care to come on and tell us about your favorite hunting methods? Kathy, I'm going to ask you next, so get ready.
Wow. I've just been so engrossed because, I have 29 more questions to go. I'm sorry, folks. I'm trying to type in as fast as I can. It depends. We're talking about big game right now. But I guess I prefer spot and stock, just because I don't do well sitting in one place for hours on end to try to ambush and just hope something wanders by. I like to be a little bit more active when I'm out there hunting and trying to, outmaneuver. I mean, right now it's turkey season, so I'm going out actually tomorrow to do some spot and stock turkey hunting through the woods to try to outsmart them, call them into me. So I like to move a little bit more. I've done blind hunting, but I do prefer to move a little bit more when I'm out there in the woods. But that's my own personal preference.
All right, Kathy, I know you're probably busy answering questions too, but do you have a preferred method of hunting? If you did not, oh, there you are.
Can you hear me? I agree with Andre.
Kathy? Are you there? All right, well, Kathy, oh, is she talking? I don't think she is.
I'm similar to Andre. Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. Hi.
I'm there with Andre. I agree.
All right, great. Thank you. Brian, I'm going to ask you for direction. However, we still have 29 open questions. So I'm wondering if there's anything we can do to stall, anything we can talk about and get through while the rest of us try to answer the 28 open questions for everyone. And just so you all know, again, if you click on the Q&A, you can see us answering everybody else's questions. Brian, please talk about anything at all that has to do with this subject so we can answer these questions.
Yeah, so there were a couple of questions about more of an ethical question. So when we talk about using radios and we're talking about fair chase, that is a personal choice that you make out in the field. As long as you aren't breaking laws legally, you can use handheld radios and text each other. So when we talk about giving wildlife a fair chance to escape, that's your personal decision, and it's something that I think each hunter needs to wrestle with. So when we talk about fair chase, there are laws that protect animals during fair chase, but the radios is not a regulation. It's something that you as a hunter need to determine for yourself if you're going to use those radios and communicate with each other. Just remember, you cannot be telling someone, shoot my animal, and I'll put a tag on it. You can't do that. That's party hunting. That's against the law. Not only is it against the law, it is unethical. It's unsporting. So yeah, some of these things are things that hunters need to wrestle with when you go out into the field. There are some questions about applying like group applications during the draw. We do have a couple other videos posted to our CPW YouTube channel. There's a video that we did a while back called The Secrets to the Big Game Draw. We're already past the primary draw, but that's a good video that goes through a lot of information on how the draw works, the processes to it, some of the ins and outs of that, how to play the game with the draw. So if you are applying as a group, right, there are rules on whether you can draw or not. So one of the questions that was out there is, if you apply as a group in the primary draw, if one person gets it, then the whole group gets it. And the short answer to that is yes, but the downside to the group applications is, this is a limited license draw. Every hunt code has a quota. When we run out of licenses in that quota, we don't have any more licenses available, so we draw out. So if you're hunting in a group that has 5 people and one person in your group gets drawn, but there's only 3 licenses left, your group isn't going to be able to go, right? Because there isn't 5 licenses left for you. So pros and cons to that group application process. You can look on our website. You can look into our big game brochure a little bit to look at some of the ins and outs of the group applications on that. Does anybody else, looking at some of the questions, does anyone have any other questions that we can answer live?
I've got 2 to cover here, Brian. There's a lot of questions about where to get landowner information. That's not something that our agency puts out. And specifically, I know most, including myself, wildlife officers, are not going to give out landowner information in the districts that we reside and live in, because we have to live with those people, and it doesn't reflect well when 100 people come knocking on their doors saying the game warden recommended their house in their place. So I only give out that information if a landowner comes to me because they're having some sort of game damage issue, or they have an overpopulation on their property and they're looking for more hunters. Otherwise, I'm not giving that information out. Those are my neighbors. Those, the people that I live with and have relationships with. So we don't give that information out. There's lots of resources. You can go to county assessor's office and buy a plat map. They're like $35 for the county, and it gives a map. It's a paper book. Some of the more common ones that people are using now are like Onyx maps. Going to the, I think Base Maps or something is another one. So resources like that are places you can get landowner information, but it's not something that our agency is going to put out there. And then the other one, there was a question I saw, and it brought up a couple other points for me, asking if you wound an animal and it crosses a GMU boundary that your license is not good for, what to do in that instance. And the best advice I can give you is back out, record your location, contact the local officer, and get direction from them on how to proceed. Depending on the situation, depending on what they're dealing with at the time, they're going to give you some guidance on how to proceed from there. I've gone out in the field and helped guys try and recover animals, but technically, if that happens, you don't have a license to go into the next unit and harvest that animal, even if it means finishing, shooting an animal that you've already shot and hit once and wounded. You would be in violation of your license. So it's better to kind of get the blessing and the guidance from the local officer there before you do that, so that we don't get a call from somebody else down the road trying to turn you in for hunting in the wrong unit. It just helps to clear that stuff up. And along with that, the same goes for any, like at night, if you shoot an animal in the evening and you try and recover it at night, you're not allowed to shoot that animal again in the dark. You have to wait until the next day for legal shooting hours. Otherwise, you would be utilizing artificial light, which is illegal, and shooting after hours. And any of those types of violations then make that animal illegal, an illegal harvest altogether, an illegal possession. So it can get, the charges can unfortunately kind of stack on you unintentionally by making a little mistake like that, by shooting after hours, utilizing light, and then having an illegal animal on your hands. So if you think you have a questionable hit, you're not sure that that animal is gonna be deceased when you recover it or when you find it, back out, give it till the next day. If it's someplace that you don't have permission or your tag's not valid for, back out, contact an officer, contact an office, and get some direction from them and get some help. That way you don't find yourself in a sticky situation in that regard.
All right, I'm going to ask another question here from the list. So somebody wants to know, this is actually a really interesting question that I've thought of before. If you have no cell service, but you have a radio, is there a way to contact a wildlife officer that is appropriate, or should you try to get back into cell phone range? That's a really interesting question to me. Officers. That's for you.
I'm going to default to John because he's going to run into that a lot more than I am out here.
Are you guys kind of like, oh, you get it? No, you, I'll let you answer that.
Unfortunately, through radio channels, there is not a public communication way to get a hold of us. It's either contact State Patrol or they're going to have to back out and get cell coverage, or if they have a inReach, like a Garmin inReach where they can do satellite text messages, they could text that to whoever to get a hold of us that way. But unfortunately, there's not a way through our radio channels to do it.
So just get creative, maybe that, like you're saying, like that feature where you can use satellite to text a friend to do it. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. So there's a couple folks asking, and we do get a lot of these questions every week about trespassing and cutting corners of property. Can you talk maybe about reiterate that it is illegal to even just hop across a sliver of private property, and what it actually means to corner across, because that really is super important. Even if it just seems like a little thing, it really is. Can you talk about that, and again reiterate like maybe the penalties and what that actually means and entails?
Yeah, as far as that, anytime you cross private property, whether it be crossing it to hunt or crossing it, you're looking at a trespassing issue. And cutting corners, technically you are crossing a piece of private. And unless you're most of the stuff that's out there, like the Onyx, the GPS, they all have an error factor on them. So you're taking a chance, because they could be 20 feet off, they could be 3 feet off, they could be 60 feet off. So the best bet is to not cut corners, and don't cross private property at all. If you're hunting, you're getting into the realm of, that's one that's an automatic 20 points assessed against hunting and fishing privileges, and you could come up to a suspensions hearing for your license. The way our system works, if you accumulate 20 or more points given on violations, different violations, you can be suspended, and 20 is that threshold that you're probably going to hear from our license hearings examiner to see whether you'll be suspended, privileges for a year or two, depending on how bad the violations are. So cutting corners is not a good deal, nor going on private property at any time unless you have permission.
Excellent, thank you. Let's see.
Hey, I don't know if Logan or John has any advice. I think there's a couple of questions about recommended calibers for sort of your backup sidearm handgun out in the field. I think the answer is it's sort of a personal choice. My choice has been I don't take one out even when I'm bow hunting. I don't take one when I'm rifle hunting. That's just my choice. I haven't taken them, but I don't know if John or Logan, I don't know if you've got any practical advice from being out in the field with a lot of hunters, what they carry, your thoughts on that.
Honestly, it's a personal choice, and honestly, they probably don't need them. But it's the firearm that they can hold and they can shoot straight, and what fits them. But we don't have recommendations. It's completely personal.
Yeah, I agree. Whatever you can handle properly and have practice with and are comfortable with. I don't like to carry a lot of extra weight, so limiting that. If I'm carrying something, it's usually more of a compact style handgun rather than a full-size heavy piece of machinery, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it. So whatever you can handle and function and feel confident in. I know a lot of people that I talk to carrying in the mountains, 357 is probably one of the more popular, or 45 from what I've come across, but John probably sees a lot more of that than I do out here.
Excellent. Since we're just going through final questions, we're going to answer some more live, but since people are starting to drop off, sensing the end is coming, I just want to let everyone know again that these recordings will be available on the Colorado Parks and Wildlife YouTube channel coming up next week. So if you want to see any of the recordings, the first 3 are up and this one will be up soon. All you have to do is go to YouTube and search for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. We're the first folks that show up. You'll see our logo right there. Click on that, and we actually have a playlist specifically for these. I put it in the chat feature earlier, so you can also just click there for it right now. But if you need to find it later, just go to YouTube and search for Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and you'll be able to find these up there. All right, let's ask some more questions. What weather information do you folks in the field trust the most? Brian, you plan hunts and for your hunter outreach seminars. Also, maybe you can talk kind of more about your program after this question and what opportunities are available for non-COVID times. But what weather service do you folks trust the most?
Yeah, so I think just about any smartphone app or anything that you can get on your computer, a lot of them are basing on their weather information coming out of the same office, you know, so they may interpret things a little bit different. So I tend to use AccuWeather because it's almost has the word accurate in it. I don't know if that's true or not, but I found it works just as good as any other one, but I'll back it up. I've got a couple of phones, and so I've got a couple of different weather apps that are out there. As far as weather and hunting goes, you know, employing some tactics. If you are fortunate enough to go hunt right after a nice light snow, wow, what a great time to get out, because you can see tracks, you can see the direction of movement, you can identify species and gender. Right, and if you keep that in your mind, even after the snow melts or next year, you might actually see some of the patterns that are out there. So the snow just tells you a lot of information out there. I found when you get you know, some heavy snows, heavy rains, I find oftentimes game don't move quite that often, but maybe on the front side of that or on the back side of those, they might be moving a little bit more. So I don't know if John or Logan has any great weather related ideas, like where you get your weather reports, and if you got any favorite hunting conditions with weather.
I don't trust any weather resources because it never seems to be right here in Colorado, first of all. Secondly, I love gloomy, wet, snowy, misty days. The more miserable the weather, the more fun I tend to have. Doesn't necessarily mean I have more success. I just enjoy it more. So
I don't agree with that, but cool. Everyone was telling me that my deer hunt success rate was going to be really low because it was 75 degrees out. I had the best time out there. Did I get a deer? No. It was amazing though. I just got to sit outside for days. It was great. So somebody had a question here that I wanted to ask you all. Where'd it go? Everyone keeps asking more questions. Okay, we will have questions opportunities for the next 2 weeks coming up. So I'm sorry, but we are running out of time. We're supposed to end in just about 2 minutes here. So perhaps if folks could ask questions next week or the week after, that would really help us out to stay on time. But where's the one I wanted to ask you folks? Oh, I think somebody already answered it. Oops. Okay, I'm just gonna go down the list from the oldest questions, and we'll knock them off like that. And maybe the people answering questions via text can start from the bottom if you scroll down. So we have a question: any links to records showing where hunting guides and groups have obtained permits? This person wants to avoid those areas. Is that a thing? Does that exist anywhere? Any records of where hunting guides and groups have permits? Or do people just have to hope?
Yeah, you need to go to the local Forest Service or the BLM, whoever issues those permits, and then they should have camp locations associated with them that they could give other hunters.
Great, thank you. All right, next one. Is the link for state trust land, does it give info on how to lease it or who has leased it? Does anybody know that answer?
I've only been on it a couple of times. I think it does have that information on there. I think at this current time, because we're in the process of leasing a bunch of properties as an agency for public access. I think any of those properties that there is interest in us, by us or in the state land board for us to lease, I think there's a current hold on those until we're done with that process at the end of next year. So a lot of those properties I don't think are going to be available for most people to be able to lease at this moment, at least for another year, but I'm not 100% on that. And I don't know exactly how it defines who has what leases on it, because the majority of those leases are not recreation. They are for agriculture. And previous to the last 3 to 5 years, it was just one lease for surface rights, which included recreation with ag rights and stuff like that. So a lot of those ag leases have retained the recreation right for the last 30, 40 years, and that's recently changed. And so there's a lot of turnover in figuring out who has what right now. It's not the easiest thing to.
All right, we have another question here talking about overlapping seasons. I'm just going to read it because I'm not super, I don't know exactly all the details. So this person applied for early rifle buck in Unit 24, September 5th through the 13th. It overlaps with archery season. And is this a conflict of interest in any way? They're trying to understand the rationale for letting this happen. Are there an abundance of bucks, perhaps? Can somebody who knows more about that question answer?
I'll attempt to answer it. Many of these units that have an early season rifle hunt, you know, I don't know if they have any east slope, but west slope, they're typically, they have a decent or a high buck-doe ratio. They have a very limited number of licenses for that early high season or high country hunt, or the early season hunt. And often those high country tags or the early season tags are limited to like the wilderness area, where the general archery licenses are broader, good for the whole unit. But based on numbers, you know, you have maybe 20 to 30 tags total for those early season hunts in a specific GMU.
All right. So the next question, given that GPS is often off by a bit, does Colorado use township range markers that can be used to help identify location? Does anybody know how we do that? We have people at Colorado Parks and Wildlife who are in GIS and mapping who could probably answer that, but do any of us know that? I don't think so. So that is a question. So if the person who asked this would like more info, I will reply to you with contact info for our mapping folks. All right, so don't know what that means. Oh, artificial light. We mentioned using artificial light before. If an animal has already been, it is dead in the proper hours, can you use artificial light after dark to aid you in processing?
Yes, the artificial light. I should have said no to watch your face. Yeah, so the issue of artificial light is going to come down to when you're taking a shot or trying to harvest that animal. Once that animal's down and you're processing it, the harvest has taken place. You're just doing the processing and taking care of that meat, and the artificial light is fine. You can use your flashlight and stuff like that to walk into your stand in the dark. You just can't be using it to find animals and stuff like that. If you're driving in a vehicle, you can't shine a light out away from the road. I mean, other than where your headlights shine on the road, you can't be shining flashlights or spotlights out the window looking for game if you have any sort of a weapon in the vehicle. Is also illegal. So that would be, I mean, what most people are going to call spotlighting, but even if you're driving to your hunting location, you got the bow in the back seat, and there's some deer in the ditch, and you roll down the window and shine the flashlight on them, that's not a legal activity while you have that weapon in the vehicle with you.
Excellent. All right, so it looks like we are just about out of questions. Brian, can you just tell us really quick about the Hunter Outreach Program in general while I finish one thing, and then we'll wrap up and say goodbye.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen super quick. We're going to go to the Colorado Parks and Wildlife webpage. To log in, cpw.state.co.us. If you want to look at our hunter outreach page, up on the blue bar, there's a learn button. Click learn. There is a learn to hunt, so hit that. And then as you scroll down, there's hunter education. That's if you want to take hunter ed. You're going to need that before you get some licenses. But there's also this hunter outreach program. I'm just going to quickly kind of pull that up, but there's some information here. We do have mentored hunts for novice hunters that are available. We do not have a hunt for everybody that applies. We have lots of educational opportunities from clinics and seminars. You want to learn about elk hunting? We have a bunch of articles in Elk Hunting University. We got a turkey school. There's a lot of hunting outreach videos. Maybe you want to get involved, become a hunt mentor. There's other organizations out there. When the hunting season starts, we do have a prize drawing opportunity. If you are a hunter, but you know of a novice going out, take them out and apply. You might be drawn for some wonderful prizes. There is some stuff, if you got youth in your family, you are a youth, there's some, it's a great opportunity to be a youth hunting in Colorado. And then of course we got some other stuff, some questions, and we got a few game recipes out there. So if you want to take a look at that and a little bit more, a lot of good information there. So I am going to stop sharing.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Next week, we are talking about secondary draw and leftover and over-the-counter licenses. So there's going to be a lot of detailed information. This is a really great opportunity. If you have those questions that you might not feel comfortable raising your hand about in a hunter ed class, this is the place to come and ask those questions. And we'll have lots of folks here on to help answer anything. I know it took me a pretty long time to understand that. Andre, you look really scary. All right, I think he moved into a cave. So next week will be a lot of really solid information about how to apply for the draw. Basically just any way you can get a license. So that's important for hunting, I think. I want to thank everybody for joining, especially the folks, the 116 folks that are still watching right now. Looks like we had about 230 folks on at the peak I saw. Again, hit up our YouTube page for more. Want to thank our panelists and thank Andre and Kathy for answering tons and tons of questions. And I'm hoping there's a way we can get all those questions and answers from all these webinars out to the public. We're working on it, folks. All right, thank you all, and we will see you next week, and we appreciate your time. Have a great evening.